My name is Asia Sampson, and today on Baptism Overland, we are installing the ARB differential cover and changing out the gear oil. If you watch any of my videos, then you'll know that I usually have all the parts laid out for you to take a look at before I do the install. But as you can see, there is nothing here, and that's because I actually already did the install of the differential cover. Reason for it is because we were going on a trip, going out of town about 3-4 hours away, and I wanted to change out the gear oil before we left. So I just didn't have time to film the intro. I did film the install, so I will show you that, and you can actually skip to that right here. Anyway, the reason I'm doing this video is because you're supposed to change out the gear oil every 50 to 60,000 miles, and right now I'm hovering at about 72,000, which means that this Jeep is way past due. And the last thing I want is for my differentials to lock up and start giving me problems because I never changed out the fluids. So then I started thinking, well, if I'm going to change out the gear oil, then why not go ahead and change out the differential cover too? I mean, I'm now going to be changing out the fluids again for another 50 to 60,000 miles. This is a good opportunity to go ahead and replace the cover. I decided I'm going to just stay stock with the front, but in the back, I did want to do something a little bit more robust since I'm starting to do a little bit more trails and I don't want that thing getting banged up and being broken off. I wanted to just go ahead and upgrade that now. Plus, with the Jeep being lifted and you can see the differential cover when you're following me, I thought just something that looks even nicer than the stock version. So I started shopping around for differential covers and looked at different products and different companies, and I just kept coming back to ARB. Now, to be fair, I am sort of biased towards ARB products. I just love how their products look. But their differential cover, for me, just beats the rest of them. They do come in two colors, a red and a black, and I decided to go with black just to kind of match the color scheme of the Jeep. And with that black differential cover on there next to the Old Man Emu yellow shocks, it just, I mean, it looks really cool. Now, the good thing about upgrading to the ARB differential cover versus having the stock one is, number one, it's just a lot more robust. When I do a side-by-side, you will see later on how much more robust the ARB differential cover is. I mean, this thing is massive, it's heavy, and it's not going to break off no matter what trails you hit. Second thing is that now, instead of filling the differential with fluid from the front like you did with stock, you actually fill it from the top now, which makes filling it a little bit easier. Now, in the stock versions, you would fill that little hole at the front until it starts to drip out, and that's how you'll know if there's enough fluid. Well, since you're no longer filling it from the front in the ARB one, the way you would know if you've put enough fluids in there is you have a dipstick on the ARB. So what's cool about that is now you can check the levels of your differential fluid, and you can also look at the status of it and see how it's starting to look. Now, with the stock version, you can't do that. If you wanted to look at the quality of your oil, you actually have to drain the thing, and that's just going to make more of a mess, and you have to replace the fluids anyway. But at least with ARB, you can check the dipstick and see how it's looking and what's the quality of the oil that's currently in there. And you'll also see the levels of how much you have left. There were some issues I was having with that, and I will go over that also. But for now, let's just go ahead and install it, and I'll show you how we did it. All right, so what are you going to need? Well, obviously, you'll need your differential covers. All the Jeeps from 2008 and up have Dana 44 rear differentials. So you will need a Dana 44 differential cover for the rear. I went with ARB. There's many other companies out there, but just make sure that it's Dana 44. Next, you're going to need a sealant or a gasket. The sealants are liquid, and you just put it onto the cover. However, I didn't want to have to go through the mess of that, so I wanted to just use a gasket instead. These gaskets cost a little bit more, but they actually are a much cleaner and easier install. Next, you're going to need about 4 quarts of gear oil. The rear differential needs about 2.35 quarts, while the front needs about 1.05 quarts. I got Royal Purple Synthetic 75W90. You're also going to need a can of brake cleaner, and we will use this just to clean out all the gunk and all the dirt that's built up inside that differential and just totally clean out those gears. You're also going to need a spool of thread tape. Do not get the blue one, which we use for water applications, but get the yellow one, which is rated for oils and chemicals. All right, starting with the rear, we're going to go ahead and make sure that this comes out first before we drain it from the bottom. Like I said, we just don't want to be stuck if this thing doesn't come off and now we can't get fluids in there. Now that the fill plug is removed, we're going to go ahead and remove the drain plug, which is back here on the right hand side, and that one comes out pretty easy also. I'm going to be reinstalling the drain plug again later, but you will not be draining it from that anymore when the new cover comes. And there it goes. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and inspect these, make sure that they're good. This is both the fill and the drain plug, and there's magnets on them, and we just wanna make sure that there's no huge chunks on here of metal, because that would spell danger, that there's something wrong inside, but I'm not seeing anything. So let's just go ahead and clean these up with a rag. Get these nice and clean, and then we're gonna reinstall these with that thread tape, because we're basically not going to open this back up anymore. Everything will now be drained from the ARB differential cover, so this will basically be permanent, although you can still go ahead and remove it once in a while just to make sure you check the magnets on them. All right, first of all, let's take a look at just the difference between the two. There's your original and there's the ARB, and look just how much more robust this is. I think this is gonna look really cool at the bottom of the Jeep. It'll just look a lot more beefier, and this will take a lot better hits than this would have. So that's cool. Now, the way you put fluids into your differential now with the ARB one is you fill it from the hole at the top. There is your fill hole versus filling it from the front like you did with the original. That means instead of waiting for it to start dripping out of here to tell you you've had enough, you actually use the dipstick now, and that'll tell you just how much fluid you have in there. And what's cool is at the bottom of this, there's also a magnet on there as well. So all those little shavings will all be drawn to this magnet, as well as the drain hole, which is now on the front, that also has a magnet. So the way we do this is to figure out where to mark your dipstick is ARB says to put it right there as if it's screwed in. So basically it'll be right in this area there. We'll tape that down, and then we're going to use a ruler to just make sure that the bottom of this fill hole matches where the dipstick will be. So you'll basically be doing that and figuring out where that line is. But first you got to make sure that the bottoms are even. So I lined it up to the edge of the table. So now we know that it's even at the bottom. And now let's just figure out where to mark our dipstick, and I'll do that with the file. All right, so we're gonna put the drain plug back into the differential, but before we do that, I'm gonna wrap it with some yellow thread tape. Now we use the yellow thread tape versus your regular thread tape because this one is rated for actual chemicals like oils and such. So we're gonna use this because this will make sure it doesn't leak. I don't know if the superstition exists, but if you're doing a project or doing a build or doing an install, I think it's bad luck if you say, oh, this should be an easy enough job, because it barely, rarely ever is. Like all the hard projects I've ever done, thinking I'm going to run into all sorts of issues, not a single issue, no problem at all. But the simple ones that I'm thinking, oh, this will just be done in about half an hour, that's when I start running into some problems. Not that I had any major problems installing this thing. It's not like I broke gears down there or anything like that. It's just all these little things that kept popping up that just started to get really aggravating. So the first thing was removing the original differential cover to begin with. I took out all the bolts, but for some reason it just wouldn't pop off. And I think it's because the sealant that they had used had already dried up, obviously, and now it just stuck on there. But that was a pretty simple fix. I took a ball peen hammer to the side of the old differential cover and then it went ahead and popped off. So that got fixed. The second thing was my fault. Now, in the ARB instructions, there is a line in there that I missed, which said that some of these bolts may be too long depending on the differential that you might have. And I did not read that. So on one of the bolts on the very far upper left, as I was tightening it, it wouldn't go anymore. And I'm thinking something must be up. And maybe it's just threaded wrong or something. I'll just keep going. Why I would do that, I don't know. But I just kept using my torque wrench and getting it in there. And before you know it, it snapped off. So one of the bolts snapped off. And now I have to go ahead and extract the broken piece that's in there and order another bolt from ARB to replace that one. But there are 10 bolts all around the whole thing. So hopefully the other 9 bolts is tight enough that this thing won't leak. I'll know that after I drive it around some, and I'll check it every now and then to see if there's been any leakage. And the final issue that I had was that one of the bolts actually falls right behind the track bar. So I couldn't get an Allen key or a hex socket in there for me to turn it to spec. I was able to get some of it and get it as tight as I can possibly get it, but I'm not going to feel good about it until I torque it to spec. In order for me to really get to it, I'm going to need to remove the track bar from one end, lower it, and I'll be able to have access to it. And I did try to do that, but the track bar is on there so tight that I just could not get it loose. So I'm going to need to call some friends over, help me kind of loosen it up and then lower it down so I can get access to it, or I just need to hit the gym more. There's nothing there. Now, one key piece of criticism I do have is the dipstick. With your engine oil, that dipstick is just bare metal. So when you put it in there and you pull it out, you can see the level of oil that you have because the oil is dark. But because the ARB differential oil dipstick is black and Royal Purple differential oil is purple, I couldn't see where it was getting filled up to. I marked it out. I showed you exactly where I marked it so I know that that's where I'm supposed to hit, but I couldn't see the oil at all. So I was having a really hard time and I just kept putting more oil in there until I realized I may have put too much. You're only supposed to put 2.35 quarts of differential oil in your rears. And I think I may have gone up to like 2.75 until I realized, oh, this is too much. So then I had to take a bottle pump and just remove some of it until I can pretty much guesstimate that I had put 2.35 quarts in there. So in a way, the original version of filling your differential oil was kind of better because you just kind of keep filling it until you start to see it come out of the front of the hole. Well, you can't do that with this because you're filling it from the top, which does make it easier, but it was giving me issues as far as figuring out what level I'm at. I didn't really overdo it. It's not like I filled this thing all the way to the top and now it's going to go through the breather tube. I didn't do that. I just went maybe a little bit over. I might have 2.5 quarts in there versus 2.35 quarts, which I'm really hoping doesn't cause me that many issues. So the next time I change it out again, I'm gonna just probably measure out 2.35 quarts and then pour it in there. But other than that, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I love being able to look at the Jeep from the back and seeing the 2 yellow Old Man Emu springs right next to the ARB differential cover. It just completes the look down there. Plus, now I know I have something robust that can take a beating and it won't get messed up when I start hitting the trails. I'm not gonna be hitting hardcore trails like that, but it's good to know that I have the protection. I mean, the truth is, the way I use my Jeep, we don't really go rugged with it. This is not one of those mods that's super dire. I mean, honestly, if I wanted to save money, I could have just not changed out the differential cover and just changed out the oil and been done with it. But I figured I'm not going to change the oil out again for another 50 to 60,000 miles. might as well go ahead and just change the cover anyway, complete the look. And I don't know, maybe you want to change yours out as well. Maybe you actually do some hardcore rock crawling and you want something that's humongously robust and something that's not going to break on you. Well, this ARB cover fits that bill, so go ahead and give them a look. It is a little bit more expensive than all the other covers, but I think it's totally worth it. So anyway, that's it. I hope you found the install and the review somewhat informative in helping you decide whether or not this is something you want to do to your rig. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, share this video, and also follow us on Instagram at BaptismOverland. My name is Asia Sampson, and I will see you next time.
GoPro, stop recording. GoPro, stop recording. Dang it!